I'm Trevor Fishlock, and we are off on a quest along canals, lakes and rivers and estuaries that shaped our history, shaped us. So we're in our element, exploring British and Irish waterways. I'm in the heart of Northern Ireland, on Lough Neagh, a shining lake, almost an inland sea, and a wonderful place for us to start our journey through Ireland and Scotland. We'll have the spectacular beauty of mountains and lochs, discovery along the Caledonian Canal, waterside charm, and all the splendours of Irish rivers. A magnificent waterland, Lough Neagh, one of the largest expanses of freshwater in the British Isles. 18 miles long, more than 70 miles around its perimeter. The home of eels and haunt of birds. 5 of the 6 provinces of Northern Ireland touch its shores, and 6 rivers flow into it. Every self-respecting lake has its legends, and here my favourite story tells of the Irish giant Finn McCool in hot pursuit of a thieving Scottish giant. And Finn McCool scooped up a handful of earthen rock and threw it at him and missed. And that grew into the Isle of Man. And the place where Finn McCool gathered up all that earthen rock, you're looking at it. It filled with rain and became Lough Neagh. On the western shore of Lough Neagh, well worn by wind and rain, this high cross has stood as a witness to the Christian presence in Ireland for more than 1,000 years. It's the last remnant of a monastery built in the 6th century here at Ardbow, and it illustrates in its carvings stories from the Old Testament and the life of Christ, a true teaching cross. The sandstone cross was already old when the medieval parish was founded here, and in the graveyard stand the remains of a 17th century Protestant church, abandoned in the 18th. In their simple way, the ruined stones and graves tell of faith enduring through the centuries beside the loch. Nearby, Coyle's Cottage, 300 years old, a typical home for a farmer or fisherman. Whitewashed mud walls, thickly thatched with reeds harvested on the lake shore, keeping it snug. These days, the loch is much more a place of play than work, for enjoying the birds and the breeze. The boats are there primarily for pottering and paddling. Exploration and personal expeditions. quiet dip of the paddle, and the noisier excitement of jet skis doing the twist. Less than a mile from the shore of Lough Neagh, Coney Island beckons. A magical place, a refuge, a home for people for more than 8,000 years. I'm told that the warden here loves it, and I've come to find out why. Peter.
Good morning, Trevor. Good to meet you.
Good to see you.
Good to meet
Yes.
you. Welcome to Coney Island.
This is your own desert island.
This is my island.
Yeah.
This is my home. It has been my home now for
No other people?
just over. No, but I have plenty of,
Inhabitants?
well, wildlife, as you see.
Yeah.
I think possibly it's the peace and tranquility of the place that really appeals to me. And of course, it is a bird sanctuary, and I love birds. Simple as that. I see a little robin over there, sitting on the bush.
Old friend of yours?
An old friend. Sometimes it'll come and feed from my hand. You know, to him. We could try it and see.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will or not, but it might. No, more interested, I think, in insects at the moment. I do work here with youth groups and that, and I was walking around one day with a group, and the robin was there, so I just broke the peanut up and held my hand out, and didn't talk away to the children, you see. And the robin came down and fed away on my hand, and they were amazed, you know, that the robin would do that. Lovely bird, beautiful birds.
Living and working on the island, Peter knows every inch of its 8 acres, the habits of its creatures, and every chapter of its history.
This would have been the original shoreline of Lough Neagh. So the water would have washed around here and around the base of the round tower, which is about 20 yards from where we're standing. The Normans were billeted there, if you like, and they dug a well here. This tree has grown around the well and encompasses the well. It's a beautiful beech tree. It's over 114, 115 years old. My question for the archaeologists was, why dig a well 20 yards from your front door when you've got 179 billion gallons of water going past every day? So I had to go back to the archaeologists and find out why, and they said it wasn't a well per se, it was a safe. It's where the Normans put all the treasures. Coney Island was as far west as the Normans came. They intended to forge further west, but they didn't. We can only assume that they intermingled with local peoples, married and dispersed. If they did, the treasures were forgotten about and remained in the well until 1564, when Lord Henry Sidney was sent over here to control the O'Neills, who were stationed here and who were warring with the O'Connors, who were in the island of Derrawara. He discovered the goods in the well, fished them out, brought them back to England, became the wealthiest man in the British Isles, bought his way into the ministry, and became the equivalent of Prime Minister of the time, Lord Deputy Sheriff or some such. An extract from a letter he wrote to a friend of his boasting about the gold. He says, "I have so much gold plate on my sideboard, I fear I shall have to engage a carpenter to construct me a new one." But he's a miserable old goat and the place has fallen down around him when he died. If that tree ever comes down, you'll not see me for dust, because he's bound to have left a wee trinket in there for my retirement. So this obelisk then was built to commemorate, well, apparently a visit by St. Patrick. But I think if St. Patrick had to visit all the places he is supposed to have visited, he didn't be here yet. But you see, it says on the plaque, it is reputed that St. Patrick visited this island and rested on this spot. And I think the operative word there is reputed, really.
But the island is a place of pilgrimage.
The fact that there's a place of pilgrimage is beyond dispute. Why the island is a place of pilgrimage, we don't know. Islands, even to this day, have a certain mystique about them. But it may just have been the peace and tranquility of the place, somewhere for a treat, to get away from everything else. Maybe that's the reason, I don't know.
It is tranquil.
It is tranquil, and if you find that and you find the peace in it, you'll come back again and again.
Now we head for a town that grew up on an island west of here. Enniskillen, county town of Fermanagh, forms a link between Upper and Lower Lough Erne. The lakes and the river define Enniskillen and endow it with its magical air, as water can lift the spirits. And to tell us the town's story, local historians Briege McCusker and John Cunningham.
The River Erne is the third largest river system in Ireland. It drains about 1 million acres and has been the main highway of communication for thousands of years. Everybody from the Iron Age, Stone Age, Iron Age, Bronze Age, early Christian missionaries, Vikings, Normans, medieval Irish chieftains, and the incoming English and Scottish settlers here in the 1600s and 1700s all used the Erne as the means of transport around this particular area here.
And when visitors come to this town, they call it really the Venice of the North. They can't believe it is an island. And if you walk from one side of it to the other, it actually is about 6/10 of a mile. And it's called Enniskillen, and it's taken its name from the old warrior Kathleen, who was down fighting in the Midlands of Ireland. She got wounded, didn't want to die there, and came back, dragged herself back, and rumour has it that she died on the island. Of course, being historians, Johnny and I, we do dispute which island she died on, whether it was this large island or a smaller one.
The flag that you see flying on the castle there is the flag of St George, which is on the crest of the Enniskillens, the Enniskillen Fusiliers and the Enniskillen Dragoons, very famous army regiments of the British Army. And Enniskillen is the only town in the entire British Isles that has raised 2 regiments for the British Army. And their cap badge was the flag of St George, and they wore it at the Battle of Waterloo and a lot of other famous campaigns that the Enniskillen regiments were involved in.
I think one of the things that we love bringing visitors into the castle and showing them is the actual castle. It has been refurbished recently. Over £600,000 was spent on it. And when you come into the first little room, you're seeing that original vault room that the Maguires had. And this was going back to the time of Hugh the Hospitable, a wonderful chieftain who lived originally out at Monastic and used to bring people together at one time of the year. And young ladies were given dowries if they couldn't afford it. Am I correct in saying that, Johnny?
That's correct.
Gave them dowries, and there was a lovely feeling of really good humour.
It's good to think that the spirit of Hugh the Hospitable lives on. And I'm sure that if you lived here, so close to the kindly water, you'd be influenced by the tradition of good humour and generosity and feel blessed.
Well, there's always a good piece about water. I think and the fact that, you know, the streetscape of Enniskillen is basically the same roughly as it was from about the early 1600s. So there's a good sense of continuity and history around here. And we also have a very possibly a unique mix of population around here. County Fermanagh is made up of English people, Irish people and Scottish people. So these people by and large have coexisted very well together down through the years, and perhaps is living in a peaceful surrounded by a lake.
This idea of water, when I look at water, it's this tranquility that I see, and it's the ripple, and I can stare at the water for hours upon hours and feel nothing and yet feel everything. And I think it's the same thing about the people, that the people of Fermanagh, that there's a certain soul we have. There's an inner spirit that it makes us actually quite unique to the rest of the country, because we are a water people. We're just quiet and reflective, and as you know, look at us, never fighting people, not like the other counties.
Our journey now takes us back to the 6th century, the time of the great flowering of the Irish monasteries. Men, and a small number of women too, gave their lives to prayer, study and relentless work. Here, on Devenish Island, monks founded the most significant of the sacred island settlements on Lough Neagh. In medieval times, it flourished as a church and a priory. And in the 12th century, stonemasons built this perfect round bell tower, almost 100 feet high, to call the monks to prayer and provide a refuge in troubled times. The lovely 15th century cross, encrusted with lichens, is one of the many stones and ruins that together speak of the divinity of this place. Church walls and graceful arches framing views of the lake waters evoke the sense of peace and remoteness that drew pilgrims to this island and its sisters through the ages. On the wild north coast of Ireland, we meet again our old friend Finn McCool, the Irish giant. Legend says that it was Finn who built this, the Giant's Causeway, as stepping stones to Scotland. Quite a stride for you and me, just a hop and a skip for a giant. So we'll follow in his footsteps across the sea to Scotland and the glory of Loch Lomond. 14 miles north of Glasgow, it's one of the Great Lakes of Britain. The poignant old song sings of its bonny banks. And in the encircling arms of mountains, it's ever enchanting and inspiring. 24 miles long and 5 miles wide, its waters are jewelled by a scatter of 60 green islands. Let's go to one of them, Inchcailloch. The warden here is Sarah Millinger.
People, for over 400 years, starting in the end of the 12th century, people rowed out to the island every Sunday because the parish then was called Inchcailloch as well. And people rowed out to the south side of the island where there was a little jetty and a little gravel beach now. And they would have then walked up through the Coffin Valley, as it is called, and come here to worship. And the minister would have been with them. The minister might have not lived here, but came out as well. And it was for that same reason people came also here to hold their funerals. The clans that mainly are buried here are the MacFarlanes and the MacGregors and various other clans. The MacFarlanes were resident at the northwest of Loch Lomond and the MacGregors were resident at the northeast of Loch Lomond, and both quite famous clans for cattle thieving. So much that the moon at that time was called the MacFarlanes' lantern because MacFarlanes were always out in the night thieving the kettle. So there is a long history of people coming over to the island from that clan. And so they had their burials here. What they would do, they would meet the families at the mainland, the family who had a deceased person, and they would invite everyone in, and everyone who arrived would get a dram of whiskey and a bit of cheese, maybe a bit of tobacco, and as everyone dropped in bit by bit, everyone had a dram and another dram and another dram, so that everyone was quite merry by the time everyone has arrived. And then it was time to load the coffin onto the barge and come over here to the island. So there is lots of stories about very merry times when there were more floods of whiskey than actually tears, I would have said.
Every year, in the footsteps of pilgrims and worshippers, more than 20,000 visitors land at Inchcailloch to walk its woods and trails, steeping themselves in tranquility.
The oaks are important as an ecosystem for the island, and so therefore we always try and tell people that they are only visitors here. The people that really, or the things that really live here is nature, and nature comes first.
far beneath the snowy cap of Ben Lomond, the Loch Lomond patrol boat. Aboard is Ranger Graham Archibald, who helps visitors to be aware of the natural life and beauty that they seek.
My job is basically part of a team of navigation rangers who are responsible for offering information and assistance to loch users in Loch Lomond. And I think people need to remember that Loch Lomond sits at the centre of the first national park in Scotland, and when they do come here they need to be mindful of the way they conduct themselves. On Loch Lomond there's somewhere in the region of 30 plus islands, 3 of which have sort of permanent residents. One's Inchtavanach, Inchfad and Inchmurn. In fact, there's actually a hotel on Inchmurn, so there's quite a bit of activity with boats going backwards and forwards to the hotel. Yeah, another part of our job as well is sort of monitoring and recording key species on the loch. So, for instance, over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, we've had a pair of ospreys nest on one of the islands, which has been great. And in the last 3 years, we've managed, well, not us, but the birds have managed to rear sort of 8 chicks, which have been ringed, and some of them should be sort of coming back into the area, now or next season, and hopefully setting up their own nests and sort of increasing the number of ospreys that are in Scotland, which would be great. Another thing that we sometimes see as well is actually deer swimming between the islands. Depending on the age of the animal or the sex, all you'll see is this head and a sort of big pair of antlers sort of moving its way through the water. And the first time you see it, you're sort of taking a double take to actually sort of convince yourself that what you're seeing is actually real. But it happens quite regularly. There's a reasonable population of fallow deer on the islands, and from time to time you will see the deer swimming between the islands. But all in all, Loch Lomond is one of the most beautiful places you could ever want to visit. And just ask people to, if they are going to be using the loch, be mindful of the wildlife that is in the area and respect it. And it'll be there for generations to come.
And now, for your amazement, the Falkirk Wheel. If you've never seen it before, you'll marvel at the vision of its designers. It's the world's first rotating boat lift, scooping passenger boats from one canal and lifting them into another. From here, on the Forth and Clyde Canal, the boats are lifted to the Union Canal, 115 feet above. The boats remain afloat and passengers stay in their seats. The gentle ride from one canal to another takes 15 minutes. It's like floating on a great Ferris wheel. Not only rotating, but revolutionary. And all this, lifting boats, people and water, requires only a small amount of electric power. Boats, water and moving parts are perfectly balanced. And boats always remain perfectly level. If Thomas Telford, that genius of 19th century engineering, could see it, he'd certainly raise his hat in salute. The Falkirk Wheel in central Scotland marks a new era of investment and canal technology on British waterways. an engineering wonder. The sheer range of fresh air activities on Scottish waterways is tremendous. Here on Loch Neagh, in the north of Scotland, many fishermen have travelled hundreds of miles to cast their lines for pike. Around the shore, the foliage takes on the mellow tints of autumn. The salmon fishing season is over, but the pike fishermen are out in strength, watching, waiting. And skill and patience are rewarded with a golden fish. Loch Neagh is one of 4 highland lakes connected by waterways to form the Great Caledonian Canal, which links Fort William to Inverness, a distance of 60 miles. Since the Caledonian Canal follows the line of the Great Glen, the bonus for every traveller is a succession of views on the grand scale. On the shore of Loch Neagh, the Well of the Seven Heads tells of a 17th century feud of murder, vengeance, and the beheading of 7 men. The manager of Highland Canals, Russell Thompson, fills in more of the canal's history.
Caledonian Canal, the history of it really is an intrinsic part of the Highlands. It was built in the early 1800s to provide a safe route from the east to west coast, in part as well to provide labour for the work-starved Highlanders of the day. So it was designed and built by Thomas Telford, but the work itself was by Highland crofters and people from the local communities. It was a fantastic engineering challenge in the day, and I think that's well demonstrated that those very same skills were taken worldwide into Canada. Thomas Telford himself was taken over to be an advisor for the Göta Canal in Sweden. So what was delivered here in this part of Scotland has stood the test of time and is been taken elsewhere around the world. The Caledonian Canal is nearly 200 years old now. She's quite an old lady, really, and we're very fortunate that there has been significant investment in her. From the mid-1990s through to 2005, there was a 10-year, £20 million lock stabilisation programme that really has helped secure the canal for future generations. The canal itself is fantastic in terms of a setting. It's large scale. It passes through fantastic communities. It links from the Moray Firth in the east coast through to Fort William, Loch Ness in the west, and it passes through the Great Glen, which is one of the most stunning parts of the world.
In the tradition of travelling waterways for pleasure, it's best to take your time. The swing bridge swings slowly and helps you to stretch out the day. It would be possible to make the trip from Fort William to Inverness in 14 hours, but then you'd miss out on the simple enjoyment of ambling and pondering, of absorbing the landscape slowly, making a good job of fixing it in your memory. In any case, the Caledonian Canal these days is chiefly used by leisure traffic. As a working waterway, it was the first state-funded transport link in Britain. Engineers and labourers built it in 17 years, and it's punctuated by 29 locks. Out of the canal lock, we head gently northeast. And at the end of the canal, our first view of Loch Ness. Its name is known all over the world, something it shares with Loch Lomond. 23 miles long, it's a picture of lovely wooded hillsides. Dramatic on its rocky North Shore promontory, Urquhart Castle rises as a fearsome medieval fist, built to intimidate. A quiet old veteran now, but its many scars evoke its turbulent past.
We've had quite a few battles going on here over the years. Edward I laid siege to the place. He appeared up here with an army and decided he wanted to take the castle. He succeeded in taking the castle. We took the castle back again. He took the castle back again off us. And eventually Robert the Bruce's army appeared up here and they retook the castle again. Then over the coming 150 years we had numerous raids by the MacDonalds of the Isles, who were of Viking descent. They occupied and reoccupied this area on numerous occasions. Then we go up to the end of the 17th century. John Grant was eventually given the lairdship of the castle, and that really was about about towards the end of the last sort of siege in the castle. He'd actually moved out of the place and it had fallen into disrepair. There was a constable left in the castle to keep an eye on what was going on. The Jacobite army appeared in this area for whatever reason best known to themselves and decided that they were going to take the castle. So the Grants got back into the castle and they decided to defend the place. For some reason the Highlanders decided they weren't going to bother with it, and they left, and the Grants actually blew the main gate off the castle, so rendering it useless. Obviously the most easiest place to gain access in any fortification castle is the main gate, and basically that was the end of the castle's life as a fortification.
The towers of Urquhart Castle were sited here to command a great sweep of Loch Ness. Under a scowling sky, the water seems dark and brooding, made more mysterious by swirling mists. And the nature of the water itself, its inky depth of 750 feet, has conspired in its enduring enigma, the legend of the Loch Ness Monster. Down the centuries, wishful thinking, folk tales, forgeries, hoaxes and any number of claimed sightings have all stirred the idea that mysterious prehistoric beasts inhabit Loch Ness. But expeditions and scientific searches have found not a thing. Still, there are some fascinating stories about creatures in the depths of the loch, and George Edwards, a skipper and coast guard, is happy to relate them.
Over the years, I've seen far too many things that I really can't explain, but I have to say, there's got to be more than one of them. It would be a very old creature at 1,500 years old. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the first recorded sighting was made by St. Columba in 565 AD, almost 1,500 years ago. And of course, these creatures have been seen consistently ever since. Well, all I've seen over the years is single black humps in the water. I have to say that I've never seen anything with 3 humps and a long neck. I tend to sort of call that the media monster. I'm convinced that when people say they've seen 3 humps in the water, they've seen 3 of the creatures at the one time. As to what they are, of course, that's a different story. Have a guess yourself, you could be right. Because at the end of the day, there's not one iota of biological evidence to support the existence of any large creatures in Loch Ness. But far too many people have been seeing them now for far too long. I know a friend of mine, he's dead now, a man called Ian Cameron. Ian was a police inspector in Inverness, and Ian, many years ago, and one of his constables, they were out on a boat in Loch Ness over at Doge at the top end of the loch up here. They were doing a bit of fishing in their rowing boat, and they saw something in the water, and they actually followed one of these creatures up the loch for I think it was an hour and a quarter. And what made that sighting more remarkable was 11 people in different locations around Loch Ness saw the same thing at the same time. Now all these people couldn't have been imagining things, you know. It wasn't a trick of the light. I mean, there's no doubt at all they exist. Okay, I shall have seen yourselves today here. You can see the odd log in the water. You'll see the odd roe deer, a red deer in the water. You might see a seal in Loch Ness occasionally, because the seals will follow the salmon up the River Ness when they come into the sea. People will see things like that in the water. But over the years, I've seen things that I really cannot explain. There is absolutely no doubt at all, in my opinion, about the existence of these creatures. I think a lot of people come here as being total skeptic, but when they leave, I think I'll put that little bit of doubt in their minds, and maybe they go away and think, well, maybe there is something in Loch Ness. And as I say, I'm convinced there is. And I like to think that I can convince people that there is something in the Loch as well.
We all love the idea of a monster, and we'd be delighted if a marvellous water dragon were pulled up squirming in a net. In the meantime, we'll keep our eyes open. You never know.
So, a reluctant farewell toast to Scotland, and the comforting thought that Scotland and Ireland share a genius for making magnificent whisky. And as we all know, great whisky needs wonderful water.
The story of Irish whisky can be told in many parts of Ireland. But we've come to Loch's Distillery Museum in County Westmeath, where they've restored the old water wheel. And they use the last surviving example of an old-fashioned still. Loch's has been bought by Cooley's Distillery, and tradition flourishes. They still make whisky.
They took over the remains of Loch's distillery. There are a number of warehouses all around the complex which are full of maturing whisky. We have a thriving tourist business still run by the local community, the tourist side of it. We fill the casks here. We empty the casks to go for bottling. We have a cooperage here with 2 coopers. We revived the trade of coopering in the area again. And we also, last year, for the 250th anniversary of the distillery, we put going what you can see behind me here, a nice little still. And here we make about 350 litres of malt whisky per day. The whisky's made for the world market. We send whisky all across the United States, France, Germany, and about 42 countries. We have a number of our own labels, which the main ones are Kilbeggan, Torconnell, Connemara, and of course the Lochs and Lochs Malt. Most Irish whiskies are non-peated. We do a peated whisky called Connemara, and the way the flavour is got into the whisky is at the drying of the malt. And the peat smoke passes through the damp malting barley, and that flavour carries through to the end product. We believe that Irish whisky is the best, and the tradition, of course, of making whisky in these islands goes back to the Irish. The Irish, in fact, taught the Scotch how to make whisky. We give all the tourists a taste here of the whisky at the end of their tour. It all depends on the person who tastes it, but anyone who is a whisky drinker, they have a good reaction, and they really like the product. Whisky has always been my drink, and how better to end up than looking after about 56,000 casks of Irish whisky, each cask containing about 200 litres.
Now we come to the last of the waterways in our journey through Ireland. The mighty Shannon is chief river of the Republic and the longest. Rising in Northern Ireland, it's the backbone of a network of canals and winds attractively towards its broad estuary on the Atlantic coast. Like all great rivers, it's played its crucial part in history, a water highway between north and south. a strategic boundary between east and west. Today, the river and its lakes form a water sports paradise, a place where people ponder the mysteries of boats. For centuries, the Shannon has been famous for its simple, seaworthy wooden boats. Pat Doran, a retired fisherman, keeps the tradition alive. He's built many of the old-fashioned boats and loves their rugged strength.
They're unique in that on the mud flats on the river, they're a dish-bottom boat, not flat. I've never known one of these canals to capsize in my life. And we're often fishing I was fishing in force 9 wind, and those were my father before me. And for safety, you couldn't have a safer boat. I had 7 to build in 1 year alone, and I built these on my own. And I'm still asked, the fishing is gone, the reed is on the way out as well, and I'm still asked to build these.
These are the sort of tall and curving reeds that have for hundreds of years made thatch for houses. And Pat goes ashore to see if they're ready for cutting. But they're not quite ripe for harvesting, and Pat gets back to the Shannon and all its stories.
From Limerick down, you're in one of the biggest rivers in the British Isle, the Shannon. It starts off above in the Bog of Allen, up near the north of Ireland, and right down to Lough Neagh, and out 60 miles from Limerick out to the main Atlantic coast. That's what the Shannon. But it's an unforgiving river at times, and I've been fishing on 53 years now, salmon fishing on this river, and it's a beautiful river. And I fell in love with it from the age of 10 years of age, when I stole my father's boat and came down over Cottonopolis Falls, which I should never have done, and I got a good hiding for it as well.
I was reared here all my life, learned to swim here, fell out of the boat here, tried not to fall out now, and a lot of wildlife around. That's why I love this area. You know, changes in the winter, summer, all the different seasons. You know, I introduced the mallard duck here, wild geese, grey-leg geese. There's otters here, you know, plenty of herons, plenty of wildlife here. As I said, I was reared here, so it's an attraction, you know, a way of life, really. You know, we learn to fish, swim, got married.
It's just a beautiful river, and I love it, and I could keep talking all night about it. So you can tell me stop now when you're ready.
At dusk, the lights shine on the Shannon as we reach busy Limerick. The Norman conquerors built St John's Castle in 1210 to command the river crossing and enforce their rule in southwest Ireland. The city that grew around its walls is the third largest in the Republic. Certainly, it's large enough to provide a busy nightlife for the crowds crossing the river, heading for the lights. Nightfall signals music and song and companionship in the pub. Every sort of band is welcome here, professionals and amateur groups trying their luck. This evening, there's traditional entertainment here in Dolan's pub near Limerick Docks. Once a popular place for men who work the ships and sailors home from the sea. Limerick stands at the point on the Shannon where the freshwater river begins to mingle with the salt of the sea. The estuary is busy with shipping. More than 2,000 years ago, the Shannon was known to Greek geographers. Viking longboats rode through here to penetrate Ireland's heart. 5 ports serve this stretch of the river, and the man responsible for making them all run smoothly is the sailor turned harbour master Alan Coughlin.
I went to sea in 1966. I joined a company called Irish Shipping and spent 16 or 17 very, very happy years there. I then came ashore. I saw a job advertised for assistant harbour master at Limerick, and that was in 1982. When I came ashore first, every ship that left the river, I felt I should have been on it. It's a hard feeling to shake. The job itself was very, very interesting. It was a different aspect of maritime activity that I'd seen before, but I never really appreciated all the problems involved or what was directly involved. And I became to like it. I absolutely love what I'm doing. I love water. I love ships. I like people who go to sea on ships. I like solving the problems that are associated with ships. I suppose I like the activity of knowing that you're playing a part in the economic well-being of the region, along with everyone else. It's not just me, it's a team, but I happen to have the honour of leading that team. And, I just like it.
Further down the estuary, at the tanker port of Foynes, one of the harbour master's colleagues, Hugh Conlon, monitors the coming and going of every vessel on his electronic lookout. In every port, ship's captains rely on the local knowledge and experience of pilots to guide them in and out. Here at work are Martin Brennan and Richie Glynn.
So we're just heading off out here to this green ship here. It's called the Arklow Wind. And we'd be transferring the pilot onto the ship. So we'd actually be going alongside the vessel. With the boat, obviously.
Yeah. And then when the pilot were to get on the ship, he'd take charge of the ship and bring it up to Alcan, where she would load alumina, which is our cargo that would she bring back to Norway.
We're still, in fact, inside in the Shannon. We're not outside on the sea. So it will give you an idea, an indication what conditions would be like outside today. Reasonably calm enough today for this this type of job. We did before we went more safety conscious work in we'd say worse weather, a lot worse weather than this, but we try to keep it reasonably safe weather today. It may look as if it's particularly bad, but it's not really at the moment. What you've got to watch is when you're going alongside the ship, that you have a good lee, that everything is right for when you transfer the man. You've got to think of the pilot and the other crewmen on deck.
And there are times as well that the ship is quite happy to stay safely at anchor, as opposed to trying to navigate into a harbour when it has very bad weather conditions and could possibly do damage to the harbour or the ship itself. So yeah, you just have to know when to go and when to stop. It's one of those jobs. It's about a 20,000 tonner ship. She will be one of the small to middle-sized ships that come into the Shannon River, and we handle ships from about 1,500 tons up to 150. Money Point ship go up to 180,000 tons. So the volume of traffic that comes into the Shannon is tonnage-wise, it's extremely large. So there's the ship now.
Yeah, you can see now that the ship is making a lee, and that we'll go alongside.
We will be able to go alongside.
240 miles from its source, the Shannon surrenders at last to the embrace of the sea. The Atlantic Ocean lies ahead. Our journey too, through all the stories and beauty of the waterways of Scotland and Ireland, has come to an end.